Microphone is on. I can't hear her at all. Diana Jacob.
Okay. Just plate out the way. And I will get my coffee and we will be ready to go.
Okay. So it looks like we've got about 10 people in here already. We're probably 15 minutes away from starting the webinar. Welcome. Glad you're here. And just hang tight until we get everybody on the line. Okay. I am not.
Y'all just sit and listen to the music and chill, okay? Give me a break. All right. Okay. Can you see me?
I can see you. I can't hear you.
But you can't. Oh, I don't have my headphones on. Doggone it. Gee, duh. How's that?
That sounds much better.
I am so sorry.
You're totally fine. How you doing, Diana?
I think I'm doing terrific in spite of that old root canal I had.
Oh.
Yeah, I had that Monday. They gave me, I have anxiety when it comes to going to the dentist, so they have to give me those pills that make me pretend I was there, but I don't remember anything.
I like those
You know,
pills.
yeah, I did too. And they decided since my anxiety was so high, they would give me 3. So it was lorazepam. They were 2 milligrams each, and most people take 1, and I got 6 all at once.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, so I went just being so prepared to be knocked out, and I was not knocked out. And the doctor was like, I don't understand. I said, I don't either. What are we going to do? And he says, I just want you to trust me. And I said, I've been married before. That doesn't work with me. So anyway,
Huh.
it didn't kick in until after he was finished because I was so anxious that it fought even the 6 milligrams. But got it done.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. Well,
Yeah.
I think we have about 16 people in the room right now
Oh, golly. I'm sorry. I thought
who
I
are
was just
watching.
talking to
So
you. Okay.
say again.
I thought I was just talking with you.
Well, we've got some folks that have joined in as we're waiting. We're set to start here in about 15 minutes. So
Okay. I'm going to try to pull up a sheet I pulled up this morning on common errors of appraisals. see. Common errors in reporting. Is this it? Nope.
So
Find that.
Diana,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry that I missed you when you were here
I'm
week before
sorry
last.
too.
I had I had that level 2 training with the Appraisal Foundation down in Florida.
How did that go?
It was fun. We had a nice time.
Well, good.
Um, but I was really hoping to be here for your shoot, and I'm excited about the courses. I've seen a couple of the videos, and they look great. And you come across perfectly on the camera, and the course is going to be amazing.
Oh, I hope so. I certainly wanted to be. It had a lot of reception when I wrote it, and a lot of people are excited about taking it now that I've rewritten it, which is what you got. You actually, there's only one person that's gonna, one group that's gonna see it before you release it.
Awesome.
So that'll give me a good chance to get it tried out.
That's great. I know that I'm kind of a placeholder this morning. Brian is on his way in. Apparently, he's got about 10 more minutes to get here. So as soon as he gets in, I'm going to hand off to Brian and let you guys talk about the things that you talk about.
Okay.
Um,
And I apologize, but I'm going to ask you, you're not Sam, right? You're
this is Hal.
Hal. You're Hal.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I
You see me there?
apologize. I see you. I just couldn't recall your name.
Yeah. I'm Hal.
Okay. Well, good. And I'm glad you got it. They just sent that information to me on the video clips. I think it was yesterday, or at least yesterday was the first day I was awake from the process. And so um, I just got a chance to see just one, and I thought, oh, okay, this should work, you know. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a whole different way of bringing things in, which is
Well,
wonderful.
that's the thing that we're kind of most excited about is we've done a number of courses this way, and I really um, I'm proud of the way we're putting these courses together. I think they look good. I think there's a lot of good information being imparted. I know you had the chance to review Jack Bailey's course, the
I
income
did.
course, Introduction to Income Properties. Um, and we just got that approved. That's going to launch here in the next week or so. Where it's just fun to put together a product that people can kind of engage with and have a good time with, and not just kind of pluck through and get their certification.
Well, I told everyone there that I had a chance to. It's the best online that I've ever seen presented. I've seen lots of online presentations, and they have all evolved, but none to the level yours has. And yours kept me engaged, and I knew the material. So if somebody's going to get bored, it would be me. And just because I've been around since Noah landed the ark and helped him figure out highest and best use. So, you know, I've watched all of this stuff come by. And this was really just refreshing. I thought, you know what? I could easily just enjoy taking this as I could being in a live class. So I think that's just great. And I'm proud of
One of the
y'all.
things
Very
we
proud
got
of you.
into a discussion um, at that investigator training down in Tampa, and some of the folks were saying that there's no replacement for live education, and I agree with that to a degree. There are opportunities for networking and meeting people in a live situation, but I think one of the things that a lot of the people that I was with in Tampa don't understand is they're all employees of the government
Mhm.
or an institution, and when they take time to go do a course like this, they're paid for their time they're away. All of their travel is covered. Appraisers, the boots on the ground appraisers, are traveling to take a course is an onerous thing. You got to pay for the course. You've got to travel to get there, pay for the hotel for a night or two, and while you're there, you're not making any money.
And you have to also hope you don't get sick. If you got sick, you just lost it. Whereas if it's an online course, you can say, you know what? I got to go lay down for a while. And
Exactly.
that's also, but what I would say to those people, and I have always said I prefer a live environment because I like that interaction. Your presentation allowed me to feel like I was having interaction with the instructor. What I think I would say to those naysayers is, so then why are we going to AVMs? Why are we deciding that that's okay, but it's not okay to electronically have an exchange? You know, grandparents have been making hi, how are you, grandma misses you for years since Skype came about, and that bonds those two generations together. I don't know why in the world they think it would be any different for the learning. The
Well, I
only
think
problem is being able to raise your hand and say, I have a question. And there are mechanisms that allow you to do it. It's just not quite the same.
there are, and I think the thing that a lot of people have a hard time getting their head around is the online format historically has been a series of PDFs that you have to read and then a quiz at the end. And
Right.
what we're trying to do is present some engaging video content and allow the instructor to get in front of the camera. Also means he's getting in front of the learners and kind of deliver that information in a little bit more of an engaging fashion. I'm proud of it. I think it looks good.
Oh, you should be. You've done an excellent job. All of you have a lot to be proud of. It's a beautiful product. It really
Yeah.
is. And I'm just thrilled that I get a chance to offer some of my information to you and that you're willing to take a chance on me. So I
Oh, we're
thank you for
tickled with
that.
it. I will say this. I want to say this really quick. We've got just about 7 minutes before we're supposed to start this webinar. Brian is on his way. He's supposed to be here any minute. So as soon as he gets here, I'll hand it off to him. But for those of you who have just joined, this is Appraiser eLearning, the appraisal report webinar. We're happy that you're here. It looks like we've got about 30 people in the room right now. And I also want to say to the folks in the class joining the webinar, if you have any questions or you want to ask about Appraiser eLearning in general, or any of the things that Brian and Diana talk about today, you can send a question through the chat app in the webinar browser. I think it's up here in the top left-hand corner. There's a chat button, and you can ask questions that way. And the instructors, Diana and Brian, will see those, and they can respond to those at the break. So as we're going along, and you're listening to what Diana and Brian have to say, if you have a question, don't hesitate to pop it up into the chat and let them know what you want to hear about. Diana, I'm going to put you on the screen again and let you carry this. I'm going to step out for a second to see where Brian is.
Okay. And before you step out real quick, where is the question that if we get do I kind of share my screen, and are you going to send it to me by email? Is there another way that question is going to come to me?
I
How will I
believe
know?
it will show up in the chat on the right-hand side of your
Oh, okay.
screen.
Yeah, mine's
That's
on the left, but that's okay.
okay. And if you click on the chat button on the left there, it should open up a chat dialogue on the right-hand side or somewhere on your screen.
If I do that, it won't interfere with anything, right?
I
No,
don't think
here
so.
it goes. I got it now. It's on the right-hand side. Gotcha.
Right. Well, I think Brian just walked into the house. I'm going to step away. I'm going to leave you on the screen, Diana, and
All
I'm going to
right.
step out and hand it off to Brian.
Sounds good.
Hang on.
Hey there, pretty lady.
Hello, hello. How
Can
are
you
you
hear me?
doing? I can. How can you hear me?
I gotcha. I gotcha. How I just need to turn this this up.
I've got it turned as high as I can get it.
Oh, really? Yeah, Sam. Diana, I just rolled in. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I am doing well. Excited about today and the chat. I pulled up a couple of things in case it would help along the way, although you and I have never really had any problems talking with one another.
That is one thing we seem to not have much difficulty doing. Hey, I just rolled in. We've got about 4 minutes or so before we're actually going to kick this thing off. allow some more folks to join in. I'm going to jump down the hall 1 second. I'll be right back.
All righty. I'll be here.
All right, I'm back.
Good deal.
We've still got a couple of minutes, and we do have some folks already on. Welcome, all the appraisers. I gotta finish getting fixed up here a little bit. Had a long drive to Nashville, bumped into a little bit of traffic, but those things happen, you know. So I'm tickled to death to have my good friend, Miss Diana Jacob, on with us this morning. We've got probably about 60 seconds. It looks like it's 9:59 my time. So we're going to get started here in just about 1 minute. Until we do, what's going on in your world, Diana?
Well, I'm excited to say that today the turtles actually hopped off the back of the truck. We're not getting rain today. And it's been so long since we've not had a day with rain that the turtles just decided naturally to stay on the back of the pickups until it decided to stop. We are filled with water down here, but with a little bit of luck, no rain today. That means my foot-high grass will get mowed tomorrow.
There you go. You know, we've had just the opposite. We've had a bit of a drought, and got a little bit of rain yesterday. So we actually were welcoming the rain. But yeah, it's tough when you go that. I've got a little garden. We're excited about that. We've already got some questions coming in, so that's
Okay.
great. We're gonna certainly get to those if I can figure out my phone here. So I have 10 o'clock and I have 10 o'clock on the nose. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome all the folks that are already chimed in. We've got a good audience already, Diana, and more people are joining on every second. So I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Brian Reynolds with the Appraisal Report. It is our monthly webinar we do through Appraiser eLearning, and we would like to welcome everyone out there that's already joined in and those others that are coming on quite frequently. If you've ever been in a class of mine, it's likely that you heard me talk about my good friend Diana, and I have encouraged you that if you get an opportunity, that you should do yourself a favor and sit in on one of Miss Diana's courses. I brag on you a lot, Diana. You know, she lived in Texas for many years, but I said now she's back in
back home
to Louisiana. And back in the day, she would certainly kick her shoes off up front and speak in that good Cajun accent. And not only are you going to have a great time and a lot of fun with Miss Diana, you're going to learn something. And so we're tickled to death to have Diana as our guest today. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, in particular of some of the common threads that appraisers kind of hit bumps with, or roadblocks or errors, if you want to say. And before we get into our subject matter today, Diana, why don't you just take a couple of minutes and tell everyone watching a little bit about yourself, what you do. I know you are a certified general appraiser and USPAP instructor, but let folks know what you're doing these days.
Well, for many years, I was like everyone else. I was boots on the ground. I appraised in more than one state. But as time went on, I came to know how difficult it was for appraisers who suddenly had complaints being thrown at them. It was one thing to have the phone ring and someone question one of our appraisals, but it was quite another when we started getting the notice, the official letter, the "I'm happy to talk to you, call me immediately. This is the state enforcement agency." I personally had that experience, and when I called the state, I was shocked to find out that there was no one available to help me, that this was something I was going to have to answer all by myself. And that's when I realized that appraisers, we work in such isolated situations that we really don't have someone that we can just pick up the phone and say, "Help me, I just got this letter, I don't know what to do." And so I got through my process and I was cleared, and it actually happened to me a couple of times after that, and I was able to get myself cleared. But each time I realized there was a need to help appraisers who were in this situation. I, in the classroom, try to help them avoid getting there, but I don't think any of us are free from an erroneous complaint. I just don't think that that happens. I think in your state they call them grievances.
Right.
Some people call them intake complaints until they're official complaints, and there's a process. Bottom line is, it's you against them. It's unlike any other situation. You are presumed guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. So I made it my mission that I was going to defend appraisers, and I formed my practice around what I call appraiser advocacy. I've been questioned in court about it. I was asked, "Aren't you an appraiser advocate? Doesn't that make you biased?" And I answered, absolutely I am, and absolutely yes, I am biased when it comes to the appraiser. I'm not biased when it comes to the credibility of the development or the reliability on the report, but I know what it is to research in areas where data is minimal. I know what it is to try and communicate to people who certainly just don't understand the process. Everybody thinks that they know what appraisal is. They don't. And so being able to be that bridge, being able to talk for the appraiser, appraisers aren't typically extroverts. They'll talk amongst themselves, but they really don't spend a lot of time talking to the non-appraiser groups, mainly because of the confidentiality issues. So I felt like there was a need to stand up and stand beside the appraiser, and today that's what I am. I work primarily with defense on appraisers who have been involved with appraisals on one level or another.
Great. And I share some of that with you, Diana. I've done that over the years. And before the end of the broadcast, or at the very end of the broadcast, we'd like to put, if it's all right with you, your contact information up. So
absolutely.
If there's any appraisers out there that find themselves in need of an expert, and I say that in all confidence about Miss Diana, you'll have the ability to reach out to her and kind of pick her brain. And let me say this, I'll answer any call. I'll try and help someone out, but we get paid like you get paid. You get paid for your time and your knowledge. So if you want to engage Diana, that's one thing. Don't take advantage of her, or don't attempt to take advantage of her. She gets paid for a living just like you do. I want to just kind of continue before we actually get into this about a couple of things that you said, Diana. And one, I know a dear friend, and I'm not going to mention any names, but she's a friend of yours as well. She She is currently a member of a regulatory board. She sits on a board in a nearby state of where I'm located. And I recall her saying on many occasions in their state, a lot of appraisers will agree to what's called a consent order or an agreed order, if you will. And so what that does, it stops the process. They don't actually go to a formal hearing. They don't go in front of the regulatory board themselves. They kind of cut a deal, if you will. And our mutual friend told me that she doesn't even see those until after the fact. And she said, Brian, in many of these instances, I don't think the board would have punished the appraiser quite as much as what the appraiser agreed to via the agreed order. So what are your thoughts on that? Should appraisers just automatically, take the shortcut, take the quick way out and agree to about anything? Or is it of your opinion that occasionally it's time to kind of tee it up and go in front of that regulatory board, if you will?
I would agree with you that it is the temptation for most appraisers to want it to just go away. And so when a complaint comes before them, they will typically have just this long list of all these things the appraiser did wrong, when really there was probably only one or two things that was actually in question. And the reason that they do that is intentional. It's an intimidating tactic that says, if you go along with us, all of this will go away. If you don't go along with us, then you will be faced answering every one of these charges, and there's a consequence not only financially but punitive beyond finances. Possibly you won't be able to practice for a while. And so appraisers are frightened and they want to make this go away, and so they'll say, okay, I'll sign this nolo contendo is what it's called. And the nolo contendo says, I admit no fault, but I accept the consequence. Well, it can say what it wants, and the fancy name nolo contendo doesn't do you a bit of good. It means that you have accepted the wrongs that have been placed in front of you. You just haven't answered them specifically as they are addressed. So now you can move forward, and they will allow you to appraise. Often the term that they will give is probationary suspension, meaning that if you will take the classes, you will pay the fine, you will be allowed to continue to practice, and at the end of meeting all your consequences, they will then just make it on your record that you have matched everything that you were asked to do. And so you never miss a beat as far as appraising. However, you do have to, from that day forward, answer the question, have you ever had a complaint waged against you? And the answer is yes. And your errors and omissions insurance automatically shoots up because, again, you've answered yes. It doesn't mean that you have the ability to just say, well, I did no wrong, because none of us are perfect. In fact, that's why Standard Rule 1-1C in the development section in the comment says, it's impossible to be perfect. Perfection is impossible to attain. Competence must not be based on an expectation of perfection. So if I say, for instance, it's 20, when I was really trying to say it was built in, 2000 or 19 something, yes, I got the year built mixed up with the actual age. Is that an obvious? It is. And it's obvious throughout the report that that was just an oversight. That was an error. Did that actually injure the credibility? No, it didn't. It was an oversight. It's a regrettable oversight. It's easily corrected. You have to look at what you did that was an error. I wrote an article a few years back, and it said there's 750 decisions that are made in every appraisal report the residential appraiser will do. There are 450 fields that have to be completed. So when you look at that numerous amount of information that has to be communicated, that's also that much information that had to be analyzed and concluded. Is there a chance that you might make a mistake? I think it's more likely that you would make a mistake as opposed to not making a mistake. And once the public understands that, once the court understands that, it's generally easy to hone in on that one area that someone decided to turn in the other appraiser on. A lot of times, many times, it has to do with value. They can say what they want, but that's what it's about. In terms of borrowers, it's about you didn't give me what I needed, I didn't get my loan.
Right.
In terms of lenders, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes lenders don't want the risk of that loan amount, and they will actually shoot for a lower value, and they play the game a little differently. Regardless, you're turned into the board and you're obligated to answer the board. So that's where I try to help the appraiser couch their language in such a manner that it makes it go from appraisal talk to one-on-one talk, because that's where our problem is. We write like appraisers and we don't write like we're having a conversation. And a lot of this gets cleared up when we have that conversation in writing.
Right. I agree with that. And, you know, you talk about lender pressure, and I'll echo what you said about the borrowers and the community of folks that, you know, they want to buy a house, and the dang appraisers preventing that from happening. But if you have a lender, and I know credit unions have been notorious for this, they'll have a conversation one-on-one with their appraiser client, and they'll say, now look, we're just a small hometown credit bureau. We're not this big fancy bank and credit union, excuse me. And this is our members' money that we're lending out. So Diana, if you do appraisal work for us, we just want you to be real conservative. And folks don't realize that's actually a form of lender pressure as well.
Yes.
So our job isn't to appraise too high, and our job isn't to appraise too low. Our job is to develop an independent opinion of value. And what's real frustrating in our current society, I guess I'll say, appraisers society, appraisers are scared to death. You said there's 700 plus fields. There's a high probability that we're going to make a mistake. God knows I make a lot of mistakes, but our standards of practice, our ethical standards, have in there perfection is impossible to attain and competency doesn't require perfection. You know, I studied martial arts almost my whole life, and one of the sayings that we had quite frequently was practice makes better. We didn't use the term practice makes perfect because there's really no such thing as perfection. Practice makes better. Diana, if it's okay, I want to go ahead and rattle off a couple of these questions. They're actually coming in quickly. And while I go ahead and ask one or two of these, the next thing I want to do after these questions is kind of ask that you give us, in your experience and your experience as an educator and practicing appraiser, and also an appraiser advocate, I believe is a term you used. If you could give us maybe the top 3 common errors you see, you know, the ones that we see on a regular basis that no matter how much light we shine on, it just seems that we as practitioners continue to make these mistakes. But before we do that, let me ask a couple of real quick questions for you. Our viewers ask, can you explain the difference in effective age and condition? Is one an error while the other is correct?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever had one put exactly that way. But when we talk about condition is part of what makes up that effective age. Here is the difference. Effective age considers all forms of depreciation, which includes external. Condition is not an external factor. It is a physical factor. So I can have a, say, C3, it's had minimal wear and tear. It's been well maintained, but I can have an effective age of 45, not because the property isn't in good shape. It's because the market isn't demanding that property regardless of how good and well the condition has been maintained.
Great.
That's the reason why sometimes you will see adjustments for both. A lot of times you don't, but sometimes you do see adjustments for both. And it oftentimes has to do with the fact that they didn't have a comparable in that neighborhood that was suffering the same extent of external. If there's external obsolescence and it's a slow market, finding a comparable sale can sometimes be difficult. So someone might go out to another neighborhood, believe it's competitive, and yet that doesn't have the same impact of external. So sometimes there'll be an adjustment there. You have to just explain why, but that is the primary difference between the two.
Really, I think the key to most of what we do, and I know I'm guilty of this a lot, but I think the key to most things that we do is really providing a good explanation. And I know I'm tardy on that occasionally. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. I know it made sense to me, and it's all up here on in my head. But sometimes I'm not a good communicator, and I'm not communicating what I did or sometimes what I didn't do to my client.
I think also you need to consider that we have our own language. And when you look at a form that we use to communicate our appraisal report, those fields have abbreviations. And I am always amused when I get an appraisal report from a state that I have not recently taught in or seen any appraisal reports from, because they will have these abbreviations and I'm going, what? What are they talking about? And if I'm saying that, then I go to the picture and I try to see if I could figure out from the picture what that abbreviation is. It's very common in their area, but it's not common to me at all. So if I'm struggling, I'm quite sure underwriters that from several states over are also struggling.
Yeah, I called, just to let you know, I called Mike Brunson last week.
Oh, yeah.
And I was having a conversation with him, and I assume my number's not in his phone, because when he answered, I said, Brunson, Mike Brunson, I need to talk to you for a moment. And he's like, he paused for a moment. And he said, I didn't know I was about to get a call from Jeff Foxworthy. I didn't know. So, yeah, we all have our accents. We all have different ways in which we communicate, some more effective than others. Here's another question, Miss Diana. Hank asked the question, well, the way it's written, it's a statement, but Hank says, leaving out my E&O insurance proof from my reports. So I guess his question is, should I leave that information out?
I would tell you that you need to talk with your client, and unfortunately, or fortunately, however you decide to look at it, a lot of us do business with AMCs, appraisal management companies, and I understand the dark, eerie, horrible place we all have to go when we talk AMC. And just so you'll know, I do part-time compliance management for various AMCs, so I get that. Okay, I get what you're saying. The AMCs will often, as part of their vitae, will tell their clients that they have made sure that E&O insurance is there when the appraiser does their task. And so they'll make a policy of having that E&O. One of the things that I have encouraged the lenders to do that try to make that a policy is don't make it a policy. Let the appraiser have the luxury of knowing that they've done what they're supposed to do, which is to put it on file with the AMC. Right. And then once it's on file with the AMC, if that lender still absolutely has to see a copy, then the AMC can actually forward a copy when the report is forwarded on to the client. Some people prefer to keep that private, and I don't blame them, because with all of the forgeries that go on, and they come in and they snap your identity, this identity theft. That's just one more item. When I was up and young and coming, I used to worry about the fact that I would be automatically attacked because I did have E&O, and I didn't think that I needed to advertise my target.
Sure.
It was much like the British wearing their red cross right over their heart. It was real easy to aim. You knew exactly where to shoot to kill them,
Right.
So I don't think that it's certainly not a USPAP issue, but it is a business decision that needs to be made and discussed with your client. You could even put in the body of your report, insurance is on file with the client.
Yeah. I have this conversation quite a bit. One of my students recently, when we started talking about E&O and putting a copy of that within the appraisal report, which I normally discourage folks from doing, one of my students said 20%. I said, 20% what? And his response was, since I had recommended that, he quit doing that across the board as far as a regular practice. Mm-hmm. So he quit putting copies of his E&O coverage at the end of his appraisal report. And his response to the other students in the class was 20% of his existing clients had actually called back and said, no, we need that. The bigger picture is 80% were okay. They're okay with it not being in there. And the important thing that I always say is, excuse me, it is like a target. You are putting that target. I'm working on a lawsuit right now. I'm certainly not an attorney. Most of my students know that. I do some work like Diana, where I help appraisers that get in trouble occasionally. And this gentleman's being sued. And it's an ongoing case. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but I will say this. The seller of the property was not sued. The selling agent nor the listing agent was sued. The listing or selling broker was not sued. The home inspector, of all people, you would think, right? The home inspector is not being sued. There's one entity being sued, and guess who that is? It's the appraiser. And maybe the homeowner, once they got a copy of the report, realized, hey, the appraiser has $1 million E&O policy. That's who I'm going after, that big fish. All right, Diana, we have more and more questions rolling in. Chuck actually has 2. I'll get to you in a minute, Chuck, I promise. But before we entertain some more of these questions, let's just have a little chat. Diana, I asked you a moment ago if you could kind of highlight or emphasize maybe the top 3 problem areas you see as a common thread. I mean, you get someone calls you up and says, Diana, I've got a complaint. Will you take a look at my report? And odds are one of these 3 things are going to be an issue. What would you say to our viewers out there are 3 of the most common things you see with regularity as far as problem areas?
I think the very first one would be highest and best use.
Mm-hmm.
It drives everybody crazy. Residential appraisers are like, why can you not read my report and figure this out? It is zoned residential. What else could it possibly be? And so they start with that very first legal issue of it couldn't be anything else. The reality is it could be something else. It could be vacant. Sure. Just because it says R1, detached single family, doesn't mean that the market is ready for that R1 to be built. And so you have to go through that process for 2 reasons. One, it's just good sound practice to develop a market value, to go through that critical reasoning process. And that really is what highest and best use is. It's critical reasoning. And it says, okay, I know what physically I have, what legally I'm allowed or limited to do. Is it economically feasible for me to do that right now? And if the answer is no, then the whole selection of comparable sales now becomes a whole different set of comparable sales, because now maybe I'm not looking for improved lots. I'm looking for vacant lots that are in a similar situation. The second reason is USPAP says you have to. If it's a market value, that you are developing, USPAP says that's part of your land use development. And that means you are required not only to develop it, but in standard 2, you have to also communicate any analysis that requires understanding. Now, a lot of appraisers will take the stance, well, couldn't they just read my form? I mean, what's wrong with just reading the form? Can't you figure that out? Well, you're assuming other people are as smart as you. And let me tell you something, the people who read our appraisal reports aren't, they're skilled readers, but they aren't skilled appraisers. They don't know how to link those steps of highest and best use. And so you have to help them out. You have to tell the story that bridges that makes them understand, yes, absolutely, this is what the highest and best use is. It's maddening, it's frustrating, but if you do it in such a way that they can look at that and say, oh, okay, I go to my site section, I go to my improvement section, I have a description of all my improvements. I know what the economic conditions are because I describe that in my neighborhood. And so once I've done that, well, then it makes sense to me. This isn't supposed to be a mystery at the end. We should come to the same conclusion, our reader should, that we did. And so that's why it's so important to do. That's the first one that I see.
Okay, let me pause you there for a second because I want to chime in with that just on a couple of notes. Highest and best use is certainly one of the number one items that I see in Kentucky. An investigator told me it was the number one. Standard Rule 22A, Roman numeral 10, clearly says you must put your support and rationale. And we just see that a lot. And I think the problem surrounding that, Diana, is that most residential appraisers were guilty, of checking those boxes and filling out the form that's in front of us. And there's nothing wrong with checking boxes and filling out a form. But you've got to understand that when USPAP and Fannie Mae bumps heads, USPAP wins. When USPAP and law bumps heads, that's the occasion where you would set USPAP aside. USPAP and law bumps heads, law wins. Absent that, USPAP applies. So if you have a form, and I want to remind appraisers that forms aren't USPAP compliant, appraisers are USPAP compliant.
That's right.
If the form doesn't allow you as the practitioner to be compliant with your minimum standards, then you're going to have to supplement that form. I mean, there's no question about it. Or you're going to withdraw from the assignment. It's just that simple. So I wanted to just highlight that because I agree with you. That's the first one you mentioned, and we see that a lot. And by the way, Blair had asked about highest and best use commentary, so I think we've kind of answered that question as well. Go ahead, Diana, with your next two, and then we'll get back to some questions coming in.
I think the second one I see most often is lack of support for the adjustments. Most of the residential appraisers will make a blanket statement saying all adjustments were market derived. Well, what does that mean? I know what derived means. I know what you told me the market was, but you told me where. You didn't tell me how. Or they will say things like paired sales were conducted to derive the adjustments. And then you go, well, okay, where? Now, paired sales aren't detailed in your appraisal report, but if you go to look in the work file and you see that those paired sales aren't there, then what you have is a canned comment that's worked for you before, so you're using it again, but you actually didn't do the development. What is most difficult when we talk about sales is that in many cases, it's just not possible to do paired sales. It's an impossibility. If I'm looking at 3 sales and maybe 2 of them are comps and the other one was just happened to be lucky enough to be close enough that I could throw it in there, I'm not going to be able to do a paired sales detail analysis with those 3. And so sometimes we have to use qualified judgments or breakdown methods. There are methods to develop our adjustments, but just saying something and not actually having the evidence will actually cause a lot of problems.
Great. And that's something that we have dealt with over the years. I say it was the appraiser's dirty little secret. Many times I'll ask, well, where'd you get that? And they say, well, that's just my opinion. Yeah, I understand that, but where did you come up with the decision to make an adjustment here, or not make an adjustment? What support? Well, it's just what I think. It's my opinion. And guys, that's not good enough. We all have opinions, and you're entitled to your opinion. A lot of what we do is very subjective. And I don't care what you call, whether you call the highest and best use industrial or residential or agricultural. But what I want to know is what support you have to conclude that opinion. We all have opinions, and we can differ in our opinions, but you need support. And many times on an adjustment, I've had folks say, I did a paired sales. When they're forced in a corner, they'll finally come back. Great. You did a paired sales analysis. Can I see those? Well, they're back in my office. Okay, well, let's run over to your office and take a peek, right? They're not there. And maybe you're doing paired sales in your head, but there's so many different ways, and there's so many vendors out there. There's so many articles, or we've had speakers on. Last month, we had Scott Cullen talking about how to support your opinion. We've had Tim Anderson on. Dr. Samuel Henderson has a regression analysis class that we'd encourage you to take. So, you need something to hang your hat on. Can it be different than what I formulate? Absolutely. But as long as you have something that you're basing your opinion, that's something you can sink your teeth in, whether it be agreeable with what I have or Diana has or your regulatory board has. That may be they may have a different opinion. But just saying that that's my opinion without any support, that's just not going to cut it in today's environment. It may have 20 years ago because nobody asked you. We're in an environment now where you're being asked. We're actually under a microscope. And so you better be prepared to answer some of those tough questions. All right, Diana, what's number 3?
Number 3 for me would be no support for the effective age. And I'll see effective ages, for instance, let's say the house was 60 years old. It was completely renovated, and they'll come up and say, okay, effective age is 1. You're like, all right, now let's talk about that. If you go back to our basic understanding of where depreciation occurs, we have divisions. We have, of course, securable things that we need to fix because everybody else fixed theirs, so we need to fix ours too. We have something called curable short-lived or short-lived. Those are the items that don't live the 60 years. They have a much shorter lifespan. And then we have the long-lived, those things that will last physically often beyond the economic life. When you gut a 60-year-old house and you start putting it back together, to what extent did you gut it? Did you take it all the way down to the studs? Let's say you did. Even by doing that, you're going to have to accept the fact that that which remains has lost something. And so being able to say the effective age is, and then just try to guess, and a lot of appraisers I know will say, well, I'm just going to take it to the last renovation. If it was renovated 2 years ago, I'm going to say it's a 2-year effective age. And they lose sight of the fact that there are some parts of that house that have always been there, and they are going to have some loss. And so it's that lack of understanding how to make that judgment. Now, you talked about qualified judgment and how we can all have different observations, different opinions. Absolutely. I mean, I might think that's the ugliest baby I've ever seen and wonder why they don't cover it up and the mama's taking pictures of it, you know? I mean, so, you know, what I see and what the market sees, and that's really what I'm trying to look at, is what does the market see? And part of how you can make that judgment is you can actually talk to the people that have been involved with that house. Agents, for instance, or rental property managers, and you can say, well, yeah, that property was renovated, and it's bringing the same rent as a house that's 10 years old brings. There's no difference at all. So you can form an observation with interviews and form an opinion in that way. There are formulas also, but I would say that it makes no sense to me, some of those, and especially those that try to do a cost approach then on a much older house, because they say, well, it was renovated. Well, you told me you did that because the approach was required by the client. And then you look and you say, well, the client never asked for that. Why did you do it? Well, I just always do it. Well, okay, that's fine. I'm not telling you not to, but don't try to put all the blame on the client. Don't decide for yourself why that approach was necessary to you to feel that your development needed that information in order for you to make that conclusion. And don't just jump and say, oh, I don't know, I think it's 20. You know, it's kind of like looking at the makeup dresser in the morning. If it's piled high, you know, it looks much better at night when everything's on and not off on the dresser.
All right, Diana, let me ask some more questions because they're coming in very, very quickly today. I'm actually I'm trying to get to all of them, folks, and I'm actually trying to ask them at least near the order they came in. So bear with me if your question hasn't been asked yet. Chuck asked a question, and I'm going to go ahead and ask two questions because they're both pertaining to E&O, the conversation we spoke of earlier, Diana. Chuck said, can you speak to redacting the coverage amount when providing E&O? And then Ted asked a question, why is it all right for the lender to provide your E&O to the homeowner when they are not the client? And I guess I'll try and give my opinion with what Ted just asked. Ted, the lender is required to give the borrower a copy of your appraisal report. And so if you're attaching your E&O policy at the end of your appraisal report, you in essence are actually making a copy of that E&O policy part of your appraisal report. So when the lender provides a copy of your appraisal report to the borrower, that's there. So Diana, any other comments on that or on Chuck's comment about redacting the coverage amount?
I think that's interesting that I've never even heard someone doing that, but would it be wrong to redact that information? I don't think so. I don't understand why we couldn't just put in an addendum that says E&O coverage policy number such and such. It's on file with the lender. The appraiser has met the requirements of being on the approved panel through that evidence, and leave it at that. I don't know why we would have to give them all the other details. Make that known to the client up front so that they can say, yes, this client does. I don't think we need to open doors, and I think the less we tell them, the better off we are.
Let me just close this section talking about E&O for just a second. What I've done over the years, I have carried E&O, and there were times in which I didn't carry E&O. And I'm not suggesting to our viewers that they don't carry E&O, and I'm not recommending that you do. That's a business decision. And quite frankly, it's your business decision. What I say many times, I will say at the advice of legal counsel, I've been advised to neither admit or deny coverage. It is a business decision. And quite frankly, it's my business decision and none of your business. Now, I understand, as you said earlier, there are many AMCs out there that will want, or clients that will want you to have coverage. And that's a business decision. But don't just take that to heart that, well, that means everybody's going to want it. I did a job for the United States Treasury Department one time, and they wanted E&O insurance. And I gave them that line I always give: at the advice of legal counsel, I neither admit nor deny coverage. And they actually waive the requirement. You'd be surprised how many of your clients and maybe AMC folks will actually waive a requirement if pushed. Let me ask a couple of more questions. We've got some questions, and this one is kind of a long one. So, are you ready, Diana?
I think I am. I was just getting a text saying, I'm asked this question. Did it get answered? And I'm like, oh, goodness. Now this is more than just listening.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm watching the 6 o'clock news, and I'm listening to the reporter and I'm seeing something jump down at the bottom.
Yeah,
and of course, the dog is scratching saying, you don't forget I'm here. And then you're saying, so am I ready? I am as ready as I am ever going to be. Multitasking wasn't a list I stood in line for when I was delivered down to earth.
Yeah, that came in after us, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think that came in with all the apps or something. I don't I'm not sure. Let me say this. We've got new viewers coming on every second. So I'd like to welcome any new viewers that are chiming in. We are taking questions, and the appropriate way to do a question is to enter it in the chat. That'll come to my team, and they'll bring them over to me, and then we'll get to them as soon as we can. Please don't text Diana. I want her focused on me at the moment. Diana, you may get a text from Sam or Doug in just a second, because they did have a quick question for you.
And something we might, and you just figure, I'm going to put you on the spot. If we are getting this many questions, well, maybe we need to come back again and have a topic of questions that we say absolutely whatever we don't get answered, maybe we could put some answers together and email them back or something. Because I sure hate that people are here asking questions and then feel like they don't get that chance to get them answered.
Yeah, so if this is your first time viewing with us, or if you've only viewed once or so, this is a monthly webinar. The price is right. It's free, so you can't beat that. It's called the Appraisal Report, and I have a guest or guest on every month. We're shooting probably to start doing this with consistency on the fourth Thursday of every month. I believe that's what we're going to look at 10 o'clock Central Time. So put that on your calendar. We'd love to have you. If nothing else, just put it up on your in your background while you work. You can at least listen. All right. But what we do a little different here at the Appraisal Report, we have a live conversation with our guest. And let me just say, I certainly don't have all the answers, and probably none of my guests have all the answers. So sometimes you may ask a question and we may have to just agree we don't have the answer, but we will try to look up that answer for you. This format is uniquely different than most webinars. Again, we don't submit questions in advance and then only answer those. We don't submit questions to our guests or to me. These questions I'm seeing right now as they're handed to me is the first time I've seen these questions. So we like that the format is kind of just having a conversation. We're playing by our own rules here. It's just a conversation, and we get to as many questions as we possibly can. But we will definitely have you back, Diana, and maybe we will just do a Q&A question instead of having a specific topic. All right, here's a question from Chuck, and it's a little lengthy, which is okay, Chuck. We like those too. But if I need to reread it, Diana, just let me know. Here we go. Chuck says, Forbes reports that San Antonio, number 1, and Austin, number 2, most overvalued home market in the United States by 17%, based on data crunched by Fitch Ratings. When providing an opinion of value, should an appraiser take this into consideration? Appraiser is using most similar sales per certification number 7.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, I read that article. I read it the day my granddaughter told me she was so excited she'd just signed her contract and closed on buying her first home in Austin. And so, of course, my first thought was, oh, my God, my granddaughter paid too much for her house.
Yeah, of course.
You think that. I think at this point, if you, I would use it like an ace that you pull out at the end of the game if necessary. I think if you have concluded a value and all of a sudden you hear screaming from lenders and borrowers who have agents who are saying, I can prove to you that's worth more all day long, you can say, I am charged with rendering an opinion about probable value. I chose the comparables I believe were the most similar, but I also have to consider the economic conditions on this day. And I think it would be wrong to ignore the fact that there is a published article that says there have been overvaluation seen in the city of Austin. Now, Austin is a huge city. And so at this point, I'm going to say that this is what I found. And unless you have a comparable that is more superior than mine, and remember, I base it on 3, not 1. I just think that we have to tender the market's awareness that they have now been told by this major publication that there is an overvaluation process going on in your town. This is not an overvaluation. I feel very strong about my opinion. That's how I would handle it. I wouldn't tell it right away. I wouldn't rely on it. But if I'm being questioned, well, then I would certainly say, guess what? Someone else thinks you're trying to shoot for a higher value, and they are a publication that went nationwide.
Right, right. So that's a very good point. And let me just chime in here for just a second. You know, that's when we talk about the 1004MC form. Yes. And I want to remind all the viewers out there that if you read that and pay careful attention to that, the 1004MC form is asking you for comparable data. The only thing you should be putting in the 1004MC is comparable data. You know, you have to keep in mind that a lender makes a loan on a subject property. They don't make a loan on a subject neighborhood, right? So it stands to reason that a lender would be interested in information about the subject and alike properties. So the question was asking about a national report about values going down. Chuck asked this question. And while I wouldn't have any problem with you referencing that as a data source and making a comment on it, I want you to remember that it is unlikely that in a neighborhood, and a whole different conversation is that we probably ought to change that term, neighborhood. That's an old term. You used to work in your neighborhood, shopped in your neighborhood, lived in your neighborhood, went to church in your neighborhood. You did everything in your neighborhood. I like the term market area. So it's a little naive to think that all properties in a given market area are doing the same thing at precisely the same time. You've got some properties that may be increasing in value, while at the same time, you may have properties that are stable. You may have other property types that are declining. So different types of properties may be doing different things within a given market area or a segment of a market area. You know, there for a while, Las Vegas seemed to be having a decline. And it's a little naive to think that all houses were declining. But I don't have any problem making a reference whatsoever. Here's another question.
Can I stop you for just a second? I understand now why they are panicked and trying to get this email to me. Someone wrote in. His name is Robbie Wilson. I think you know him. He's an instructor. He's a certified USPAP instructor, and he says, first of all, USPAP ethics rule conduct section says an appraiser must not advocate the cause or interest of any party or any issue, period. Look it up yourself. And Robbie, you are absolutely right. When I say I'm an appraiser advocate, I'm not saying that I'm an advocate for the appraiser's cause. I'm an advocate for the profession of the appraiser, and I am there to assist the appraiser to help them communicate their case to the best of their ability. When we talk about the ethics rule and we talk about that conduct section, and I thank you, Robbie, I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to make sure that everyone is aware of the difference between what I'm saying and what USPAP's trying to impart. You cannot go in and be an advocate for your client. That's the reason that we don't represent, in many cases, our children or our grandchildren in their real estate dealings. I can't say, well, I play golf with this mortgage lender, so I really like them, so I'm just going to favor them. No, we can't do that. When I say I'm an appraiser advocate, you have used some other words. You said, so perhaps the word advocate as used in this context should be replaced with other words such as an appraiser supporter or an appraiser ethicist or an appraiser defender or an appraiser lover. Do anything, but don't use the word advocate. I have had that label for many years, Robbie, and I have actually been questioned about it in court, and I explained very clearly in court, and I apologize for not explaining it more clearly here. When I say I'm an appraiser advocate, I am defending appraisers. I'm defending the profession of appraisers, but I'm not doing it to the point where I lose sight of the fact of what the appraiser's task is. And as I said earlier today, I may be an appraiser advocate, but I'm not an advocate for a cause. I'm an advocate for the profession itself. I think that people often don't see what the appraiser has to go to. Robbie goes on to say, to clarify, which is the point here, an appraiser cannot, he's made it in bold cap words, cannot be an advocate acting as an appraiser and not be in violation of the ethics rule, as well as violating public trust by precluding the very definition of an appraiser, which requires the appraiser to be independent, impartial, and objective. That's when we are in the practice of appraisal, Robbie. Mm-hmm. There's a difference there. I was not talking about being in the practice of an appraisal. I was talking about being in the practice of making appraisers better at what they do. And I will always be an advocate for making the appraiser better. But I thank you for bringing that up, because I certainly would not want to miscommunicate to anyone what I meant by that.
Yeah, and I believe there is a USPAP advisory opinion. I think it's 21, Diana. You know it better than me. And it's got circles that go around. And mm-hmm. that most outer circle is where you're in a role other than an appraiser. Okay, so the only USPAP obligation is to say that you're not going to misrepresent.
Right.
So just because you're an appraiser doesn't mean that you can't do something else. You can be a consultant. You can be a real estate agent. You can
also be an advocate for your report, which that advisory opinion says. When we are acting as advocates, we can only act as an advocate for our report, for what we did, not the cause of the client. And that is exactly what I was promoting. Never did, will never impart that we try to deceive or mislead or to defend that which is undefensible.
Let me ask you another question, Diana. We're, believe it or not, we're in the home stretch. We're running out of time, and we're running out very quickly. I'm glad we did focus on mostly questions today, because it's important that we answer the questions of our viewers, and I think we've done a good job for trying to get these out. But let me read another one here. James asked a question, and James' question is RealQuest not having correct data. So I assume this is one of his, where he gets his data.
It's a data source.
And he is saying, hey, they don't have correct information. What do I do in those instances?
I think you do the same thing you would do if you find out from the tax assessor that they have incorrectly entered data. You make it known that even though this was a published statement of fact. It really was an error of fact. And the reason that you know it was an error is that you personally measured the property, or you personally saw the property, or you were there at the time of the closing. You make that correction and you state what is real. The problem that you have is when someone reviews your work and they use that source, and then you have to come back and you have to counter with it. A lot of data got merged I would say in the last 5 years. We've had several MLSs merge. We have a lot of data sources merge. And unfortunately, when they did that merging, some of the data got lost or it got confused. And so as it stands now, it is not reflective of what happened at the time of the transaction.
Very good. You know, I had one of my people called the other day. That's the problem with live, right? Sam's not in here. My editing guy's not in here, but that's okay. One of my folks called the other day, and she said, "Brian, I've got a for sale by owner, and it may end up being the best sale. I'm trying to verify data. Obviously, it's not on MLS, so there is no MLS data." And I'm concerned about the quality of the assessor's data. You know, as far as I know, it's okay. But that's going to be my data source. So what am I going to do for verification data? And I'll let you chime in a minute, Dinah, and maybe you can give your suggestion to Miss Sarah. But my suggestion was this: although it's not practical to do this on every assignment these days, there was a time when I would actually go knock on the door. You try to find the contact information for the seller or the buyer, call them. Hey, I'm appraising one of your neighbor's homes. They went through the same process. Can I confirm some information about this property? The other thing I suggested is maybe try to call the mortgage company, find out who did the appraisal, and see if you can contact the appraiser and interview the appraiser that did the appraisal on the comp. Finally, I suggested, with the world of internet and social media and everything else we have these days, most for sale by owners put that information out there on the internet. So if you Google the property or you use some of these search engines, very often you can find the for sale by owner information, and you can get characteristics of the subject property just right off the internet. And then guess what? There's probably their phone number where you can contact them and confirm. Do you have anything you want to add on that, Diana?
I would say that before the days of technical miracles like we see with technology today, you could go into Denny's or Shoney's Big Boy, and before you sat down, you could pick up a pamphlet called For Sale by Owner. Right. And while you were waiting on the menu to be delivered, you could choose what owners had their houses for sale. Many times as an appraiser, I would scour those magazines so that I could speak to not only what was in MLS, but also for sale by owner. And if you look at the secondary guidelines, it says, please, 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 please don't limit yourself to MLS. And so I think that if an owner chooses to advertise their property, and sometimes they will advertise it a little below what you would normally find the market. A lot of times that little below is, I don't need to pay the 6%. I'm not going to pay the 6%. I'm going to offer it for less because the net is the same to me, if not a little higher. And so all I have to do as an appraiser is I have to say, well, here's what their form of advertising was. Yes, it was a for sale by owner, but they did more than just stick the sign in the yard. They also put it on the internet. They also put it in this publication. They actively engaged in marketing to the open market. Was it considered professional? No, because it was not part of the MLS. But did it have the same opportunity to compete? Absolutely, it did. And so I think that it is very much something that should be considered a comparable.
Diana, I have one more question or one more area that I want to speak on, because I see this frequently. And I believe you can help appraisers quite a bit with this. I want to talk about making a statement versus performing an analysis. if you think about USPEP and how we are required to analyze the last 3 years for the subject property, and it does say sales, I believe, not transfers, although the Fannie Mae form may say transfers. How far back do you got to analyze prior sales for the comps? Well, according to USPEP, there is no requirement.
Right.
But Fannie Mae wants that. It's on the pre-printed form. I see this all the time. Let's say comparable sale number 2 sold 6 months ago. I'll see commentary in the report that says something like, comparable sale number 2 sold February for $150,000. Period. That's all it says. And my question is, where's the analysis? We've also seen that, and UAD, I guess, help force us to put the results of our analysis for the subject contract. But we used to see the same thing. The subject property is currently listed for $150,000. It's under contract for $145,000. The seller has agreed to pay closing costs and prepaids up to $4,000. It was days on the market were 123. That's all great information, but where's the results of the analysis? Those are all just factual statements. And I believe an appraiser would be better served if they started a sentence by saying, an analysis of the prior sale revealed, or an analysis of the subject's contract revealed. What are your thoughts on that, Diana? And is that something you see regularly, that folks are just making a factual statement and they're not necessarily talking about the analysis that they were supposed to do?
I would agree with you. I think one of the things that I see often is a statement that basically repeats what is already understood. For instance, if we said that we looked at the appraisal report in the neighborhood section and the box was marked that the demand and supply were stable, and then I look in the narrative comments and it says demand in the market is stable, you haven't told me anything. You just repeated yourself.
Right.
And so it's very important that when we understand an assignment result or an analysis result, why we did the analysis. You know, if we did a supply and demand analysis, what did we base that on? And in doing so, why did we feel we could rely on it? Often we don't like to rely on the 1004MC because, quite frankly, the data is just too limited. And so we rely on other things. And so when we make our statements, we need to have backup for why that statement was made. That's really what reporting and communicating an assignment result sufficiently for understanding means. And so I'm really tying in two standards here. Standard 2 does ask that we supply sufficient information, sufficiency to be met by the measure of the user, not by other appraisers, so that they can understand why we came to the conclusions we did. We aren't writing as much as we should. Part of that has come from being told the more you write, the more you're in trouble. Part of that has come from the days when we were so well as a real estate industry that they said, appraisers, stop, you've got the form, 450 blanks, that's enough. Hold up, we don't need all of this. And that's because as soon as you turn the appraisal report in, within the next 30 days, by the time they would close, that property had already gone up in value. So they didn't need as much. But now we're in a different environment. We're in an environment that has automation all around us. We are having risk assessments all around us, and we are being judged by automation, and they already have decided based on all their numbers what our numbers should be. And when we differ, we have to be able to stand up and stand strong and say, I understand your robot said it was worth this, but your robot didn't go inside and see what I saw. Even if it had interior pictures, it didn't smell what I smelled. That's the difference. And so when we as appraisers make our statements, we need to have support. USPAP doesn't say prove in your report what you said. USPAP says support what you said.
Right.
And that's really what it's about.
Absolutely. Well, Diana, we're going to have to sign off here. We are at the 11 o'clock hour. First of all, I would like to genuinely thank you for your time and being on the appraisal report as my special guest. We will most certainly invite you back because you're just a wealth of information. And finally, would you like to give your contact information to the viewers out there? So if there's anybody that's interested in reaching out to you, or maybe they need help with a defense type situation, how can our viewers reach out to you, Diana?
You can certainly contact me at my regularly scheduled email address, Diana T. Jacob. So there's a T in the middle, Diana T. Jacob, no S, at yahoo.com.
Great. Thanks again, Diana. I appreciate your
You're very
time.
welcome.
Thanks for all the viewers that joined in. I'd like to remind you this session has been recorded and will be available for a replay. And also just a quick disclosure that, the opinions expressed here are our opinions, and we encourage you to verify any information with a reliable source. If you have an idea for an upcoming broadcast or a special guest, or if you would like to be a guest, we'd be happy to have you. Please reach out to Ben or Doug or Sam or any one of the team members here at Appraiser eLearning. Thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.